Hey guys, it's Anna here from Sew That, your certified instructor and certified shop for Quiltworx. Welcome, and we are going to be making the pocket compass. So I have my first sample done here, and next I am going to show you how to cut yours out. We're going to cut out the papers and we're going to cut out the fabric so you are ready to sew when you get here to class. So I hope you enjoy this video and you find it very informative. Good luck. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut out our papers. That's the first thing we have to do before we can cut fabric. So you're going to take your papers out of your bag, and sometimes we can cut 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 papers at a time if they have matching numbers. So the NP, or let's see, this particular pattern does not have any TPs, which are generally templates, and these are newsprint with the NP. So because this particular pattern does not have any of the same papers, we have to cut these all out individually. So you'll have to join me for a different class if you want to learn how to cut out a bunch of papers at the same time. So what you need to know, my beginners, for this class are: what is the difference between a unit, which is a foundation paper, and a template layout sheet, or TLS? You will hear it referred to very often. So these units are your foundation papers, and they're what you're actually going to sew on. Then we have what are called template layout sheets, and those are on this end, and these are what you use to cut out your fabrics. So like other paper piecing, we are going to start with strips. And if you got a kit from me, your kit already comes cut into strips, labeled and bagged by group. So that will make your cutting a lot faster. It won't make it, you know, a lot faster with a project this small, but it does help. And when you get into those bigger projects, when you do this again, you will really enjoy having your paper or your strips cut for you. Oops. So what we're going to do on these units, these foundation papers that we're going to sew on, is we're going to cut 1/8 of an inch away from the outside solid black line. And the reason for that is because you don't want to cut exactly on the solid black line yet. We'll do that later when we trim. But you don't want to cut too far away either, or it makes it a little bit harder to line your fabrics up when you're adding your next piece. So all of your J1 units are going to look like this, and you're going to have 8 of those. So just cut on your outside solid black line, and you will have some stuff to throw away. And it doesn't have to be exact, you just want it to be close. The more of these you do, the more you'll kind of understand the importance of the different parts of it. So when I started, I cut about 1/4 of an inch away. And I remember the first time I went to see Judy, she said, "You're going to want to cut that closer." And so I did. And now I just cut everything closer because she was right. It does make it easier. So when I cut out my first one, the National Parks one that you saw at the very beginning of this video, it took me 1 hour exactly to cut out all of the papers and all of the fabric. So for this particular video, I'm going to speed some parts of it up, especially when I'm cutting the same thing again that you've already seen. And if you're just watching this for the first time, before you're actually cutting, you're just watching to kind of get the hang of things, get the feel for things, you're going to want to have your Ziploc bags ready. Now, it would be smart of me to have those instructions here with me, so I'm going to have to go find those so I can tell you your bag numbers. Those of you who know me know that I probably don't always follow those. I'm always in a hurry. And I can tell quite easily what goes with what without having them bagged. So do as I say, not as I do. All right, so first paper is cut out. So I went and grabbed my pattern, before I cut the next sheet up, and I just wanted to show you where you're looking if you are interested in the bag information. So on page 6 of the pocket compass pattern, up here in the top left hand corner, you see we just need one bag J1 for all of the J units, which is what I am cutting currently. And then when we get to the next page and we start working on the G units, then you're going to need 2 bags, a bag G1 and a bag G2. Pretty easy. So we're going to cut some more units out here. So as I said a little bit ago, this took me an hour to cut out papers and fabric the first time I did this, but it most likely will go slower for you. So don't compare yourself to me. I've cut out probably 1,000 Judy patterns at this point between my own and clients, because that was a service that I offered for a period of time. I don't really do it anymore. Sometimes very special people or people who really twist my arm will get a completely cut out kit. But you know, some of the patterns take, like Harvard Lighthouse took me 18 hours to cut those out. And so a lot of times cutting is just half the battle. And that's why some people just want it done, you know, for various reasons. Wrist problems, shoulder problems, whatever it may be. And some people just want to get right to sewing, which is totally fine. So all of that we just cut out, the first 2 papers, and I'm going to come back to this booklet and I'm going to show you something that I will probably talk about in class. But for those of you who want to be really prepared and in the know, here's some information. So I just cut out papers NP 751 and NP 752. You have one of each of those, and that's what the parentheses numbers mean, is that that's how many of that particular paper that you have. Because in some of the other patterns, you may have, like I said before, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the same paper, and then that would be indicated there in the parentheses. So for Carnival Flower, when you're making 12 of each unit, most of the time they fit 3 or 4 of each unit on a page, and then you're cutting it out on different, you know, multiple pages. So then when we get over here to the G units, we've got MP 954, and we have just one of those as well. So only 3 pages total to cut out for this beautiful pocket compass that is so fast, which is why I wanted to do this as a beginner pattern. And it does actually look like a Judy Niemeyer medallion quilt, which is a lot of times the issue that I have for beginners is if it's easy enough to do as a beginner class, they say, well, that doesn't look like a Judy quilt. And a lot of times that is true, but that's where you get your repetition. And so that's when a lot of people like to do Desert Sky. I shy away from Desert Sky as a beginner class because of the curve, and that scares a lot of people off. This one does have a curve, but this curve in pocket compass is so easy. You guys that are doing this for the first time, you are going to love it because none of the points have to match. The circle is just in the background. We do have points that have to match as far as the star points go, but as far as that narrow band, the circle that goes behind the star points in the compass, the part that makes it look like a compass to me, those don't have to match up, and it is awesome. So we're just cutting on the outside solid black line. Anytime you see, whoops, if your ruler slips on you, like mine just did, you can take this and you can tape this back on with some Scotch tape. Just put Scotch tape across there and then cut it out the right way. Really not a big deal. The cutting part of paper piecing is the imperfect part of paper piecing, is what I always tell people. It really is okay. For this particular piece, you do want to have all of your smart corners and everything that you need to cut out exactly, because these are what are called T-templates, and T-templates get put in the quilt exactly as you cut them out. So if you don't cut these out in the shapes that, excuse me, in the shapes that they're supposed to be, then we might end up with a few issues. So these are the ones that you really have to look out for in this particular quilt. When you're doing just a plain old template layout sheet, that is a lot more forgiving, because you still have to paper piece it together. So you're going to trim it up more. Oh, where my rotary cutter is going today. So the T-templates, again, you can cut these out on the solid outside black line because these are going to be exact. If you cut these out with an extra 1/8 of an inch, it's okay. It just makes it just a tiny bit more difficult when you go to actually cut the fabric, because the paper wants to kind of fold in on you because there's not much there. Is it the end of the world? Nope. Just a suggestion from me. So this is going to be your bag G2. Those first papers we cut out were bag G1. And you'll see when I do this, I don't always use my ruler. I don't particularly care to use that big 6x24 ruler all the time. I actually prefer a 4x14, I think it is. But mine, I did finally find it. For those of you who did the last couple of classes with me, when I couldn't find it, when I filmed Arctic Star, I couldn't find it at all. That's the size that I prefer for these smaller cuts. The 6x24 works great for all the big stuff, but the smaller stuff, I just feel like it's kind of awkward. So there's a lot of prep work that you can do for this class to be more successful and to get farther during the class, which is why I like to do the videos ahead of time for cutting, because as I said, some of the patterns just take so long to cut out. So if you can do your cutting at home, and you can watch and rewatch and pause and whatever you want to do with this video other than share it. It's in a private group for a reason, so please don't share it. But you can do a lot of prep at home, like I was saying. So it's a good opportunity for you guys to get more out of class. Because it's better to be able to sew in class. And if you wanted to try sewing some of these things together at home, that's okay. If you run into trouble, just stop and bring it to class and we'll get you fixed up. And if you don't want to try and start at home, that's perfectly fine, because that's why you're coming to class. Some people need more help with assembly, and some people need more help with paper piecing. So what you get out of class is totally up to you. And if you just come to have a good time, that's all right. We can have a good time. Okay, so we've got Unit G1 and we've got Unit G2 in these two piles. And we're going to bag those together because there's not very many of them. And they're all essentially the same. They're a little bit different. That's why they have different numbers, but they're very close. So we have already cut out all of the papers for this pattern. Now we are going to start cutting fabric. Okay, so as I said, now we are going to cut our fabric out. We're going to start with the J units on page 6 in your booklet. So I've got the picture of mine here, the one that I'm making this time, so that you can kind of get an idea in your head of what I'm cutting when I'm cutting it, maybe. And then I also wanted to show you how my kits are cut. So these are already cut into strips, labeled and bagged by group, like I said. So if you got a kit from me, you would have a J bag and you would have a G bag, and then you would have B border pieces. So the J's we will cut first. They should all be in the same bag. If you are picking your own fabrics, you're probably going to have to cut your strips into the 3 by 3.5, the 1 at 2.5, 1 at 3, 1 at 3. It all depends on how you colored it. So for this particular one, I changed the center star to alternate blocks, so then I have 2 J4s. If you have all the same color in the center, you would only have 1 J4. So we're going to go over that. They also gave the option of having 2 different backgrounds for this big background spike of the center. I only have 1, so that's what we're going to cut out. But the instructions do tell you how to accomplish if you have chosen 2 different colors. All right, so we're going to take our J1 fabric, which is just a 19.5 inch strip. And I think I'm going to have to move this stuff anyway, so I'll try and bring that back every once in a while. And one of the things that I do, if I know my pieces are going to fit, and for this one I do because I've done it already, but what you can do if you want to make sure that your pieces are going to fit is you can, okay, so we've got a selvage here, and this will be much better when I get my new camera setup going, and the camera can be much higher than it is right now. We're working on it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this piece and we're going to flip it. And if you're doing 2 different colors, you have more than enough fabric. But if you flip it and flip it and flip it, and if you can get all 4 on one side of your fold from the bolt, then what you can do to make cutting a little bit faster is you can cut down your fold. At least this is how I do it. Not every instructor is going to do this the same. So you have to do what you're comfortable with. So then I just match up my fold again. So salvages are on the same end and fold is on the same end, or what was the fold. Both pieces are right sides up. And then we start down here in the bottom corner. And we're just going to cut that angle. Then I flip it, and I've got the whole stack fabric underneath. So now we have 4 pieces of fabric here, and we have our 1 template. And then this is extra. And then we're going to flip it again. So when you flip it, you want to make sure you're lining up the side, but also either the bottom or the, let's see here if I can pull this, the bottom or the top of your fabric, depending on which flip side you are on. Because you want to maximize the usage of your fabric. All right. So by this point I have 8 pieces of fabric under the template. And because of the angle I'm cutting at, I'm not getting all the way through, so there we go. And that's extra. And then we're going to cut this little guy off here. And we're going to cut, try to make sure it's all in the camera here. We're going to cut those tops off there. Okay, so that's cut off. And then we're going to bring it back this way so you can see that. And then I'm going to cut off this other side. So now we've got all of the outside solid black line cut on. I'm going to turn this way so you can see the whole thing. So all these little pieces are just scrap. You can throw them away. You can keep them for another project. You can do whatever you want with them. Then we are going to cut on the cut lines. So you can see there's cut line 1 and cut line 2 here. We have to cut line 1 first because cut line 2 runs into it. So there's that. And there's that. And this is scrap, as it says. Okay, so you're going to clip these together and you're going to put them in bag J1. Then we are going to move to fabric J2 that's on my label right here. So fabric J2 uses our big J1-1 template. We're going to take the label off. If you want to use this label in your pattern, so you may have noticed in the pattern you have this little yardage chart and you have a place for fabric swatches. So one thing you can do with my sticky little labels here, once you're done or you know which one you're using, you can take this little portion of the color and you can put it in there on your fabric swatch. That would be J2. So you can use the labels instead of using actual pieces of fabric, but if you're more comfortable using the actual piece of fabric, that's fine too. It's totally up to you. So we want 8 of these, and each strip will yield 3. So 3 and 3 is 9. So we'll have 1 too many if we cut them all out. If you cut them all out, it's not a big deal. Just take 1 out after you cut them. If you don't want to cut it, you want to leave it a big rectangle, that's fine. Just take it out before you cut your, so I'm just cutting the selvages off that side. And then we're going to cut this just to length. And then I'm going to stack it. Now, before I cut this one, we can take a layer off because again, we only need 8, not 9. So this whole big rectangle is extra. So you can save that in case you need it. And then we're going to take this one and set it on here. Merging it over. And then this is also scrap. So I would save it just in case, you never know. And then you have all 8 pieces under your template. So you are going to cut down each side of this template. I would throw these away. Those you won't probably use. Clip these together and put them in bag J1. Then we've got our J3 fabric. So we're gonna, if you want to, put your sticker in your book. Now we're going to use template layout sheet. No, this is just template J1-4. So that's the smaller one. out of the 2 that you have left. So we're going to cut this out 4 times because there's 2 on each template. 4 times 2 is 8, and we need 8. So again, I'm going to cut on my center fold, and all this does is speed up your cut time. If you don't want to do this, it is okay. If you want to cut out each one individually, have at it. But I am always trying to be faster. I have too many quilts to make before I die. So, extra, scrap, whatever you want to call it. Then we're going to go here. We've got 4 layers underneath. We're going to cut this in half on cut line 1. Then you can really get rid of that template, and you're just going to have 1 template on top of all 8 pieces. Clip those together and put those in bag J1. Now, for this one, this is our fabric J4. And so you can see in the pattern it's referred to as J4A and B. The labels don't have that on them. You just have to alternate. That's all it is. And you don't have to alternate right now. You'll make the blocks, you'll make 4 of each, and then before you assemble it, that's when you worry about where those are at. You definitely do not have to worry about it right now. So I'm going to do the same thing again because I have plenty of fabric. I'm cutting right on the fold. Laying what was my fold on my fold, and my salvages are together. Right here. And we're going to use template J1-5. And really, we only need 1 template because we've got 2 different fabrics times 2 pieces times 2 layers of each. Does that make sense? 2 times 2, 4, yeah. 2 times 2 times 2? Is that what it is? I don't know. Yeah, 2 times 2 is 4 times 2 is 8. Right? Math. Alright, so then all of these are extra. It sounds like my lovely neighbors have decided to start shooting off fireworks already. So if you can hear that in the background, I apologize. I've turned off everything else just for you. Okay, so we can do the same thing again. We can discard that template, and you can turn this template on top of those, clip these together, and put them in bag J1, and then that is it for J1. Okay, so now we are going to start our bag G. So for these, we've got, at least for this particular one, I colored a G1A and a G1B. And those are on your labels this time. And these are your star points for the background of the star. So, how am I going to do? So these also, again, have to be cut out exact. These are T templates, and you want them to be just right. So when I cut this out, I did not cut these apart on the dashed line. Generally speaking, we don't cut on the dash lines. These are bigger dashes, but just how it is. Okay. So we want these to be exact. So what I would do if I were you, I am not a huge fan of repositionable glue. I know Judy is. Okay, we're going to take these labels off because they're going to be in the way. We need all of these pieces. So I would, if I were you, cut there again. And lay those together again. And then, because I'm not a fan of repositionable glue, I use double-sided tape. So when you see on my supply list that I use double-sided tape, it is for this scenario right here. And you can use it on any of the other templates that you're cutting out. Okay, so the double-sided tape that I like to use is the double-sided Scotch Permanent. The blue that is says repositionable doesn't actually work that well with fabric. The permanent, they call it permanent, tape with fabric is not permanent. It doesn't leave residue or anything else. I've had really good luck with it. Unless somebody irons it to their fabric, then it's not quite as nice. But I do love the repositionable glue. So, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut these rectangles out, and then I'm going to cut the top and the bottom, and hopefully my head's staying out of the camera. Okay, and you will recall probably that when I cut my papers, I cut the ends of 2 of these off. So that's why I have that longer, because I know how long that smart corner is supposed to be just because I've done so many of these. So that's why I didn't tape it back together, but I could have taped it back together to show you, I guess. I just don't have Scotch tape other than the double-sided over here right now. Now we're going to cut on the cut line. So I cut out the whole rectangle on the outside, and now I cut on the cut line. So I've got 2 big triangles now, and we want to cut the smart corners. Okay, so those are all, that one is all cut out now. So that can go into the bag. Then we've got to cut these smart corners. And that one is fine. Okay, and so those can go in the bag. Then we need to cut this rectangle out wholly. Cut on this cut line. No, wait, I didn't cut my top and bottom yet. Haha. And I do often talk to myself, in case you're wondering. So I don't mind doing pre-recorded videos or live videos because I talk to myself anyway, so at least if I talk to myself during the videos, somebody will eventually hear me. And one thing with these T-templates, when you're lining everything up so that you don't cut on the wrong line, I've had a lot of people question me on why I do it this way. But it's just the way I do it. When I'm cutting these out, for this particular smart corner, it doesn't work. You just have to watch that cross-hatched area that you're getting the right angle. But what I like to do is I always make sure that I have the edge of my ruler on this outside solid black line, which obviously that seems obvious. And then I take the 1/4 inch marks and I line those up on the seam allowance lines that Judy gives you. So those inside solid black lines on this piece, or these pieces, are your sew lines. Those are where you're going to sew. That's your seam allowance. So it seems, yes, like that should be a given. You line up your outside line. But when I'm looking at 2 different spots all the time, I'm less likely, like 99% less likely to cut on the wrong line. And you wouldn't believe how many people cut on the wrong line, especially if you're tired or you're thinking about other things. So it's just something that I do to help me make sure that I'm cutting on the correct line, because it happens. And then it's devastating, because then you do have to recut it when, you know, and this is just a solid piece of fabric. If you were cutting out, you know, trimming off your foundation paper pieces that you just got done piecing and you cut on the wrong line, that is even more devastating, because we have to not only put the papers back together and figure out how to reuse them, but then you have to re-paper piece that entire unit most of the time. There are a lot of things that I can fix in classes, but if you cut on the wrong line, usually we're done then, at least for the time being. It's something that we really have to address. Okay, so next we've got fabric G2. So we've got 2 layers, 2 strips. We're stacking them together right sides up. When I do this, I always put the salvages off the bolt on the same end. So with batiks, it's not as easy to figure out. With printed fabric, it is easier to figure out, because you've got a print on one salvage and you've got a plain salvage, generally speaking, on the other side. And so I always put the print sides on the same side. I match up your fold from the bolt in the center, and then your strips are, generally speaking, pretty close to the same. And then when I want to cut down the center, like I'm going to do on this one, because this one we're only going to cut this piece out twice, and you may be wondering why. Because either way, we need 8 of these. 8, well, it's 8 times 2 units. And so it wouldn't all fit on one strip to do it, cut it out 3 times. We still have to cut it out 4, so we would still need a second strip. So that's why they do 2 strips, and it just makes for faster cutting. So when I stack it like this, it's going to differ from your photo in the booklet. So in the booklet, it looks like you cut it out twice. This is template layout sheet number 3 on fabric G2. Oh, so this is wrong. Okay, so this is a correction in your books, if your book hasn't already been corrected. Mine was printed, and this is something else I should tell you. So your print date on the back of here, 5/12/23, so May, or 5/15, geez Louise, 5/15/23. So on May 15th, 2023 is when they printed this booklet. So if your print date is after this, there is a chance that that's already updated. If your print date is this date, then you have the same corrections as I do. So what you would do is you would go, you can either use the QR code here with your camera on your phone on your camera on your phone. Oh my gosh. Should we do bloopers? Your camera on your phone, and you can use your QR code to get to the corrections page. Otherwise, you can go to the Quiltworx website, go to patterns, go into Pocket Compass, and on the right hand side, down that whole right hand side, if there are corrections, depending on your pattern, and obviously this one has some, you will see all the corrections, and it's based on the date that it was found. So if they have corrected the pattern after this date, and you have your pattern has a later date, you only need any of the corrections that have dates after your print date. If the corrections are listed and they are from before your print date, they're already in here. You don't need those. So we're going to go back to this guy. So that's a correction. This should be template layout sheet number 3. And it says 3 down here. They just missed it up here. So again, because I cut this strip on the fold, and I have 4 pieces under here, I only need to cut this out 1 time, as opposed to what they show 2 times here. Again, it's just a time savings thing for me, the speed demon. So we will cut this out, and then all this is scrap. Then you're going to cut on your cut line. So we've got cut line 1, cut line 2, and cut line 3. And you can split these in half, or you can leave them all together. I put mine all in one stack, but if you want to do, let's see, what do the instructions tell you to do? It just tells you to put them all in bag G1. So it's up to you how many templates you leave on top of them. These don't have any TRP lines or anything, so it really doesn't matter. You don't need to keep all the template layout sheet pieces. So clip those together and put them in bag G1. Then I chose an orange ring for this kit. So we're going to cut this out 4 times. And because of the way I stacked these, and that's why I don't need, since I cut it in half, yeah, since I cut it in half, I don't need to cut it out 4 times, I only need to cut it out 2. Thinking here. Hang on. I feel like this was an issue I had last time because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so we've got 8 of each of these. 4. Okay. I feel like this might be a correction as well because we need 16 of these total. And what they're showing you to cut 4, so you'd have 2, 4, 6, and 8, and we need 16. So we actually need to cut this out like I was cutting it out. That's okay. So another correction. We're gonna cut this out 4 times. So if you're following the pattern here, like this, you actually want to cut it out instead of just the 4 times. You want to cut it out, keep going across your strip, cut it out 8 times, because 8 times 2 is 16, and that's what you need. So I'm not sure if that's been found as a correction yet or not. I'll have to go look. And for this, the only thing we're really worried about is the sew side. So I will explain that more in class, what the sew side, how that's important to you. But the thing to know is that the sew side is really the only important part of the cutting here. So I'm going to cut that arch, and I'm going to cut this arch, but I'm not going to cut off this top because it's going to get cut off when we put it on the unit when we're doing the paper piecing, and it will get trimmed off later. So if we trim it again right now, all we're doing is wasting time. And that's just my personal opinion. Another CI may have another opinion about that to get it out of the way or something else. This is too small of a piece to worry about that. And so I say, don't waste your time, don't waste your blade, don't waste your energy of cutting it out because you don't have to. We'll do it later. So that is sometimes where you will see, like, if I cut out a kit for somebody, I don't cut the templates down to the same width as the strips. So the strips are on average, and so this is totally extra information for you versus for another pattern. But if you have a template that fits on a strip, the strips are on average 1/4 to 1/2 inch bigger than your template. And so people take all the extra time to cut off the tops and the bottoms of those. So we're doing this on my invisible piece here. And you don't have to cut off that top or bottom. in most cases, because that gives you extra wiggle room, and it just takes more time to cut it off when you have to cut it off again later. So I will cut on the cut lines in those cases, and now I'm probably way over your heads, and so I should probably just stop talking. Again, bloopers maybe. So put these in your bag, G2, or G1, sorry. And then finally, we are going to cut out our fabric G4. So this is it. This is the last fabric we're going to cut out. For your border, your B1 fabric, which whatever you have, I will tell you that the instructions say 4.5 inches. Quiltster says 4 at 5 inches. Another discrepancy. I haven't asked them to fix it yet, or seen if anybody else has asked them to fix it. On the National Parks one that I showed you at the very beginning of this video, I left mine at 5 inches. I wanted to see if it would work. And in most cases, it's probably going to work. Where it might not work is if you have, because we're going to eventually miter these, and we'll do that in class. Hopefully we get that far, since you're going to cut all this out in advance. In some cases, the 5 inches might not work because of your width of fabric. If it's only 42, it might not work. With these, they're closer to 44 inches wide. So that's where it's working for me. But some of the boutiques are a little bit narrower. So it probably will work on this one as well. We'll try it out. Because there's no reason, in my opinion, to cut off fabric if you don't need to when you already own it. And I like this pattern, and it's only 40 by 40, so adding 1/2 inch on both sides will get me up to 41 by 41, and that's okay. Okay, so back to fabric G4 here. So this, you'll notice, is a directional fabric, and these little trees all go in the same direction. Will it bother me if they don't? Because what we do, all right, so Jadelle has some different instructions in here for people who are working with directional fabric. So down here, and this is not in Quiltster. So if you have directional fabric, you're going to want to get extra fabric, and yeah, you're going to want to get extra fabric. How much extra, you may ask? You would need 2 more 7.5 inch strips. Okay. Because if you look at the instructions, we're on page 10 now here at the bottom left of page 10. What we do is we invert all of the templates to get them to fit on these strips. So that means that half of my pieces are going to be up, my trees are going to be upside down or sideways or whatever, based on how they go around the quilt. So if you're using directional fabric like this, you may want to get some extra fabric and cut it out that way. If it's not going to bother you, like for this particular fabric, you wouldn't really notice it until you got up close, because there's so much randomness to the trees. They're different colors, they're different sizes, they're different, lots of stuff. So you wouldn't necessarily notice with this one. Now, that being said, the longer I'm talking to you, I kind of feel like maybe I want to cut out the directional way. But again, that's not in Quiltster, so that's something that you have to decide before you start cutting. And if you've gotten a kit from me and you want a couple extra strips, let me know. So I'm going to show you how to lay this out both ways. I'm not actually going to cut. Well, I might cut one. We'll see. Again, I'm going to use the double-sided tape. so we can get it all laid out. Now my trick here to save time to cut this in half on the fold does not work. It's no help whatsoever. So if we're going to set this up, I lost a piece, probably on the floor. If we're going to set this up the way they have it in the booklet, page 10 bottom corner is where we're going to start, and then I'll show you the opposite way, or the other way, whatever. Okay, so what you would do is just put some double-sided tape on there, and if you want to put a little here, a little here, a little here, that's okay too. It all repositions just great, fine and dandy. Okay, so you would do that, and then you could cut here, and then you're going to flip it on itself because those are the same angles. So you may ask why we can't use the other one. Well, because the other one's the opposite angle, because it's the opposite corner, so it does not fit. So you have to turn them on themselves, and that's where the next piece also, you would tape it and place it, and then cut, and then flip it and cut. And these again need to be exact. These are going into your quilt exactly as they are, those shapes, those smart corners, all those things. So now what we can do, so you do the same thing on this other end. I better finish my speech here before as I was saying, you would want to do that with this other side here as well. So you would want to set up this side with your tape. Make sure that you're not all the way over your selvage, that you've got good clearance there, and then I would cut this angle and then flip it on itself and cut that one out. And then I would place this one and then you're going to take that one, cut that one out, and then take it and flip it on itself over here. Plenty of space. So if you're not using directional fabric, please ignore what I'm about to say. So what we would do for the directional fabric is we would go up to the next column, still on page 10, and we would lay it out in this fashion here. So then you would have 4 layers of fabric under here, and you would cut all these out so that that follows you around the quilt, that shape. So the other thing to remember though is that if you're using directional fabric and you want to do it this way, in order to get them all to lay out the same, is that you have to have all the strips laying in the same direction. They're right sides up, but you want to make sure like your trees or your stripes or your bears or whatever they are all head up, head down, tree up, tree down, whatever it may be, so that you don't have opposites, because that would be a real bummer if you went to all that extra work and bought the extra strips and did all the extra stuff and then had your strips laid out opposite. So we'll cut those out. Just like the other tea templates we cut out, those long triangle pieces. And that is it. That is all you have to do for cutting. So I'm sure that this video is going to be much longer than I had anticipated or hoped for. But most of you coming are really fresh beginners. And so I'm very excited, and I hope that this was helpful. And I will be doing this again for Wishing Star. I get to make the waterfall collection. I love waterfalls and I love the waterfall collection. So when we do the Wishing Star again, we'll get to do that. So if you haven't signed up for the Wishing Star and you'd like to try that out, we do have some space left. So again, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it helpful, and good luck again. I will see you at class.